My name is Marcus Holloway. I am 53 years old. And the moment my son-in-law laughed at me in front of 300 wedding guests was the exact moment my entire life split into two separate timelines. The one where I stayed invisible, and the one where I finally let the world see what I had really built. The ballroom smelled like roses and expensive perfume. Crystal chandeliers hung above tables draped in white linen. A string quartet played soft classical music near the stage. Every man wore tailored suits, and every woman shimmered with diamonds and polished smiles. I stood near the far wall in a brown jacket that had seen 100 winters, holding a glass of champagne I hadn't touched. I was there to watch my daughter begin her new life. I was not there to be noticed. That part suited me fine. I had lived most of my life unnoticed, until he decided to speak. Evan leaned in toward a group of sharply dressed men who looked like they belonged in boardrooms and skyscrapers. One of them glanced in my direction and asked, "And who is that?" Evan didn't hesitate. He smiled in a way that made my stomach tighten. "Oh, that's just my wife's dad. He owns some small repair place on the edge of town. Real blue-collar stuff." His voice wasn't cruel. It was dismissive, casual, like he was brushing dust off a sleeve. A few men chuckled politely. My daughter stood beside him, her smile stiff, her eyes sliding away from mine. I smiled back. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I knew something none of them did, and that knowledge would change everything. 6 months earlier, my daughter Lily had come to my house for dinner with Evan for the first time. She had been glowing. The way young women glow when they think they've found the man who will finally make everything make sense. Evan arrived in a tailored jacket, polished shoes, and a watch that probably cost more than my pickup truck. He shook my hand firmly but quickly, like he was checking a box. He talked about hedge funds, bonus structures, and how his firm was expanding into new markets. I listened, nodded, and asked him about his family. He gave short answers and steered the conversation back to himself. When Lily finally said, "Dad runs his own shop," Evan smiled thinly and replied, "That's respectable." But his eyes didn't show respect. They showed calculation. The wedding planning began soon after. Lily asked me to come along to look at venues, but somehow those plans always changed at the last minute. Caterers were selected without me. Guest lists were finalized before I even saw them. When I offered to help pay for things, Evan brushed it off. "We're good, sir. I've got it covered." Lily smiled, relieved. But a week later, she quietly asked if I could help with some unexpected expenses. I wrote the checks without hesitation. Upgraded floral arrangements, premium bar service, a photographer package that included videography. Evan never asked where the money came from. He assumed it was his. He didn't know the man he was ashamed of had quietly paid for most of his perfect wedding. The night before the ceremony, Lily called me, sounding nervous. "Dad Evans, just under a lot of pressure. He wants everything to look a certain way." I asked her what she meant. She hesitated. "He just thinks maybe you could dress a little more formal, and maybe not bring your truck to the hotel." My chest tightened, but I kept my voice calm. "Whatever makes you happy, sweetheart." The day of the wedding arrived, wrapped in sunshine and luxury. I parked my truck at the far end of the lot. I wore my best jacket. I smiled at everyone, and then Evan said what he said. In front of everyone. That night, while Lily danced and guests laughed, my phone vibrated in my pocket. Evan's name flashed on the screen. "Listen," he said, his voice confident and unbothered. "I know you might have felt a little awkward earlier, but you need to understand my world is different. The people I deal with are serious, powerful. Appearances matter. It's nothing personal." I listened quietly. He talked about money, about status, about how he was building something important, and how people like me wouldn't really understand it. I thanked him for explaining his world to me and hung up, and then I sat at my kitchen table alone, staring at the quiet house Lily had grown up in, and I opened the old black folder I kept locked in my safe. Inside were documents that told a very different story than the one Evan thought he knew. corporate registrations, contract summaries, holdings charts, the kind of paperwork that didn't belong to a small repair shop owner. Wasn't angry. I was focused because Evan had just taught me something important. He had shown me exactly how he saw the world. And once you know how someone sees the world, you know exactly how to move inside it. And what he didn't know yet was that his entire career depended on companies I quietly controlled. Asterisk, the black folder lay open in front of me. Its contents spread across the kitchen table like the skeleton of a life Evan never bothered to imagine. Corporate filings, government contracts, trust structures, and layered ownership charts formed a map of everything I had built quietly over 3 decades. I hadn't kept it hidden out of fear. I had kept it hidden out of preference. Power that doesn't announce itself lasts longer. But Evan had forced my hand the moment he laughed at me in front of my daughter. I took out my phone and made the first call before the sun was fully up. "I need you in today," I said to the woman on the other end. "Bring everything." She didn't ask why. She never did. By 8 o'clock, Claire Maddox was sitting at my kitchen table, her laptop open, eyes scanning documents that would make most bankers choke on their coffee. Claire had been my chief financial officer for 17 years. She knew who I was when almost no one else did. She knew where the money flowed, where the shell companies sat, and exactly how many institutions unknowingly worked for me. When I told her what happened at the wedding, she closed her laptop slowly and said, "He humiliated you publicly." I nodded. She leaned back and exhaled. "Then this isn't emotional. This is structural." We began reviewing Evan's firm. It took less than 10 minutes to confirm what I already suspected. His employer handled advisory and asset management for 3 aerospace firms that were directly tied to my private holdings. Not subsidiaries. Not minor partnerships. Primary accounts. Major revenue streams. Evan was personally assigned to 2 of them. "He literally manages your money," Claire said quietly. I smiled. "He thinks I run a dying repair shop." The first move didn't require anger. It required precision. Claire drafted formal letters requesting immediate reassignment of account management for 2 corporate entities. No accusations, no explanations. Just clean professional language. Effective immediately. By noon, they were sent. At 1:42 p.m., Evan called me. His voice was uncertain for the first time since I had met him. "Something strange happened at work today," he said. "2 of my largest clients requested to be reassigned. I don't understand why." I told him maybe markets were shifting. He didn't laugh. He didn't argue. He just said, "Yeah, maybe." By 3 o'clock, a 3rd account filed a formal complaint about professionalism. Claire hadn't even touched that one yet. Word was moving on its own now. Reputation always does. At 5 o'clock, Evan texted Lily that he would be working late, that he needed to straighten out a few things. She told him she loved him. He didn't reply. I sat in my quiet living room that evening, the same room where Lily had taken her first steps, and waited, because the real lesson hadn't started yet, and Evan was about to find out exactly how quickly a world built on arrogance can collapse. By the next morning, Evan's name was being spoken in rooms he had never been invited into. Not in anger, not in outrage, in concern. Concern was far more dangerous. Concern meant people were quietly distancing themselves. Concern meant conversations were happening without him in them. Claire called me at 7:18 a.m. "2 more institutional clients have flagged his conduct," she said. "No one is accusing him directly. They're just uneasy. And unease spreads." I asked her to pause everything. What was happening now didn't need my fingerprints. The structure had already begun to shift on its own at 10:30 a.m. Evan showed up at my house. He stood on my porch wearing the same tailored suit he wore to work, but it looked different on him now. The shoulders were tense. The confidence was gone. He held his phone in his hand like a lifeline. "Marcus, I need to talk to you," he said. I didn't invite him inside immediately. I looked at him through the screen door for a few seconds longer than necessary. "About what?" I asked. "My job," he said quietly. "About everything." I stepped aside and let him in. He stood in the middle of my living room, glancing around at the framed family photos, the old bookshelves, the scuffed coffee table Lily had once spilled nail polish on as a teenager. It was the kind of home he used to look through without seeing. "They're reviewing me," he said. "My supervisor, HR, compliance. They say several clients have expressed concerns about my professionalism. I don't understand what I did wrong." I leaned against the wall, folding my arms. "You told me money talks," I said. "This is what it sounds like when it starts whispering." His eyes snapped up. "You did this?" "I didn't do anything," I replied. "You taught people how to see you." He swallowed. "Marcus, I'm sorry. About the wedding. About the things I said. I didn't mean you meant them," I said. "You just didn't expect consequences." His phone buzzed. He glanced down. His face drained of color. "They've taken my portfolio," he whispered. "All of it." I watched him slowly sink onto my couch, his shoulders collapsing inward like something heavy had finally settled on his chest. "They said my accounts will be reassigned pending investigation," he said. "That my promotion is on hold." I sat across from him. "Do you know what the most dangerous part of arrogance is?" I asked. "It convinces you that your world is bigger than everyone else's, until someone quietly owns the floor under your feet." He looked up at me. "Who are you?" I didn't answer. Not yet. Because the real truth was about to surface, and it was going to shatter everything he thought he understood about power, respect. And the man whose daughter he had married, Evan, sat on my couch like a man who had just realized. The bridge beneath him was gone, but his feet were still standing on thin air. His phone lay in his lap, screen lit up with emails he was afraid to open. The confident banker who once lectured me about success now looked like a frightened boy trying to understand how gravity suddenly worked differently for him. "Who are you?" he asked again, his voice low, unsteady. I stood and walked to the window, watching sunlight crawl across the front yard, the same yard Lily used to chase fireflies in as a child. I didn't answer immediately. Not because I didn't want to, but because once I said it, nothing would be the same again. "I'm the man who paid for your wedding," I finally said. "The man whose money upgraded your bar, your flowers, your music, your photographer. The man you called a dying shop owner." His face twisted in disbelief. "That was you?" I turned back to him. "And I'm also the man whose companies generate revenue streams your firm depends on." Silence fell thick between us. He stood up slowly, as if his body wasn't sure it was allowed to move. "That's not possible." I walked to the small cabinet near the hallway and pulled out the black folder. I handed it to him. "Open it." His fingers shook as he flipped through the first few pages. Incorporation records, financial statements, ownership hierarchies, contract summaries. His breathing became shallow. He sank back onto the couch, staring at the numbers like they were written in another language. "You own these," he whispered. "I built them," I said. "From a garage, from nothing." He looked up at me, eyes wet. "My firm. Those accounts. They're yours. Yes." Everything in his face collapsed at once. Not just his confidence, his entire identity. The version of himself that believed he stood above men like me was breaking in real time. "You humiliated me," I continued calmly. "You did it publicly. In front of my daughter. You taught me who you were. And once I understood that, I chose not to be invisible anymore." "I didn't know," he repeated weakly. "That's the point," I replied. "You didn't need to know. You decided my worth without asking?" He wiped his face. "They're firing me." I nodded. "They should." He flinched. "Your behavior wasn't a mistake," I said. "It was a pattern. And patterns eventually become reputations." He stood abruptly. "I'll apologize. Publicly, privately, however you want." "This isn't about apology," I said. "It's about who you become after the apology." His phone rang again. He answered this time. I could hear his supervisor's voice faintly through the speaker. Evan's shoulders slumped as he listened. He muttered a few yes-ers and hung up. "They want me to come in tomorrow," he whispered. "Formal review, that's mercy," I replied. They could have ended it today. He looked at me like a man staring at the edge of a cliff. What about Lily? I swallowed. That depends on you. She married a man who showed her his soul on her wedding day. Only you can decide whether that soul changes. He left shortly after. His car pulled away slowly, like he was afraid to disturb the street. 2 days later, Lily came to my house alone. She cried in my arms the way she did when she was a little girl who had fallen off her bike. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't know he thought like that. I know, I said softly. He says he's changing. That he's ashamed. Shame is the beginning, I replied. Not the end. That night, Claire called me. His firm has suspended him, she said. They're conducting a full compliance investigation. Good, I replied. But what Evan still didn't know was that the next step wouldn't come from me. It would come from the industry itself, and it would hit harder than anything I had planned. The industry does not explode when it corrects itself. It contracts, quietly, invisibly, like lungs releasing air after holding it too long. And once Evan's name began circulating through compliance departments and client advisory circles, the contraction began. It started with a phone call from a regional aerospace investment group that had nothing to do with me directly. They called Claire asking for advice. We're reviewing our advisory relationships, the executive said. We heard about a Goldman associate who crossed professional boundaries with a manufacturing client. We don't want any similar exposure. They didn't mention Evan's name. They didn't need to. His reputation was already forming a shadow. By the end of that week, 3 financial firms quietly declined his job applications before he even submitted them. He didn't know why. He only knew that doors that used to open with a smile were now answered with polite silence. Goldman Sachs officially terminated him the following Monday. Violation of professional conduct standards. That was the phrase in the letter. No drama. No shouting. Just a signature and a locked email account. Lily called me the same night. He lost his job, she said, voice shaking. He's sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. He says he doesn't know who he is without it. That's because he confused status with identity, I said gently. And now he has to meet himself. She didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, Dad, I don't think I married the man I thought I did. 2 weeks later, she moved back home. Not because I asked her to, because she finally allowed herself to see. Evan tried to fight his way back into the world he once ruled. But arrogance leaves fingerprints. Smaller firms rejected him. Mid-level firms hesitated. He accepted a junior position with a regional brokerage, a job he would have laughed at a year earlier. His BMW disappeared. His tailored suits were replaced by modest jackets. His language softened. His eyes changed. But something else changed, too. He started calling me at first, to apologize, then to ask questions. How did you build it? How did you survive the early years? How do you keep people loyal? And finally, how do I become someone my wife won't be ashamed of? I answered him, not as an enemy, not as a superior, but as a man who had already paid for his mistakes in sweat and years. Lily filed for divorce. 3 months later, not in anger, in clarity, she hugged me afterward and said, You never raised me to think money makes a man. I just forgot that for a while. Time passed. I returned to my quiet routines. My truck, my jacket, my anonymity. The world never learned my name. It didn't need to. My employees were still paid. My contracts were still honored. My legacy still grew without noise. And Evan learned something. No school or salary could teach him that power without character is fragile, that respect cannot be demanded, and that the quiet man in work, boots may own the ground beneath your feet,